when I was asked to speak, I was asked to go ahead and give some information about how I got here and how I got into the position I'm in. And so I was going to go ahead and start with that. And so I'm going to start early. This is me in the back of the wagon. This is my sister pulling. And I just wanted to put this on that, and unlike Gary Bennett when I was young, they actually they have it invented a wheel at that time. So, but you know, my brothers and sisters, actually I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and some of those were interested in insects too. Particularly my older sister, the one pulling the wagon, she was interested, and she would collect bugs and things with me at the same time. They say that my, I guess my earliest days of working with insects was probably when I was about 3 years old, because my uncle was at his house, and all these May beetles were flying all over the place, and they were bothering me, and he showed me how to kill the bugs. So he said I was a 3-year-old going stamping on the bugs, saying, "Die, bug, die." That was killing these bugs. And I must have been kind of slow, because so far I've got a 2.5-year-old grandson. He's already ready to stomp on the bugs, but I'm telling him not to do that, so we'll try to save those for later. As I, you know, part of my upbringing, part of my early, I guess, exposure to entomology actually came from my mother. She was in Orleans, Indiana, and there was a research orchard in Mitchell, Indiana, which you may have known. And so she worked there in the mid-40s and helped the entomologist that was there at the research orchard. And the entomologist you might know was there was Tom Turpin. Well, actually not Tom. Ed Marshall was there in the 1940s, and she worked with Ed on the research projects. And so she kind of got interested in entomology when she was in high school. And then when I started becoming interested in insects, and she was very supportive of that, I guess, interest. And so she was always giving me different types of containers and things to put the bugs in. And as a very good mother, I guess, she would allow us to put bugs in the refrigerator and keep them in the refrigerator. And our snakes, we would catch snakes too, and we would put those in the refrigerator too, because we wouldn't have to feed them that often. So we had a back refrigerator kind of on the back porch that had all these bugs and snakes and all this other stuff in it. So she kind of helped support you know, my early interest, I guess, in entomology. So it's good to have early support. Also, while I was growing up on a farm, this is my father, and he is working right now on some different projects. He does a lot of work still. He works with the Amish, and he goes and fixes all their equipment that breaks down. Well, he was a typical farmer, and so I would help around the farm doing different types of things, of course, putting up hay and doing this other stuff. And he likes to tell about the fact that you know, when I would help him dig post holes for a new fence, that I always want to turn over all the rocks and all the logs as we're going along, and as I'm looking for different kinds of bugs or insects that I might see. And he's telling me, he tells me one time, he says, "Leave those bugs alone, they'll never make you a living." And so he remembers me telling me, no, the bugs are going to be here for a while. So I guess I proved him wrong in that position anyway. I did start collecting, though. This is probably one of the first bugs I collected, a giant stag beetle. And started collecting early and became interested in collecting insects. So I, you know, started a 4-H collection. And so started doing that earnestly, I guess. And while I was collecting insects and growing my collection, I stumbled on the fact that they had this 4-H insect ID competition. And I became interested in that and was exposed then to Dave Matthew at that point. And so I met Dave and learned more about insects and the, I guess, enthusiasm of different entomologists. And if you knew Dave, he was very enthusiastic about entomology and teaching other people about insects, particularly different farmers, and also in the 4-H programs. So I kind of became exposed in that way, and ended up at Purdue Entomology and was here for 4 years and got some exposure in different parts of the department, doing some odd jobs around the department. I worked on Hessian flies, worked some in the greenhouse, and also worked doing some things for Osmond. One of the things I did for Dr. Osmond was paint his garage. So he hired me to paint his garage and do some other odds and ends for him too. So I kind of helped out. And also while we were here, we helped Gary with the pest control conference and worked with Gary on that, get some extra money, picked up some extra cash, doing that type of thing. One thing I should probably, maybe I shouldn't mention, but I should mention this anyway. While I was here, I got a pest management scholarship from the Pest Management magazine, right? Pest Control magazine. Yeah, Pest Control Magazine gave scholarships, and so I think at that time it was $300 for the Pest Control scholarship. And so I used that money to buy an engagement ring for my wife, so she's back there. So I spent it very wisely. After I got finished with my undergrad, my wife was still finishing up, so I was here for another year. And I went on to the Alfalfa Weevil project working with Kurt Wilson. And with Kurt, I was working with Doug Caldwell also in the lab. And we did a lot of different things. I remember Kurt always getting upset with Bennett because he'd have these roaches run across his desk and it'd have little numbers on them. And he couldn't tell if they were 9s or 6s or what they were, because Gary's lab was right across the hall from that. And so Kurt was always chasing these roaches around and trying to either kill them or return them to Gary. But we also worked a lot in there working with biocontrol agents in there. Also did work with testing with insecticides and plots and all this. So it's got a lot of field research and field experience from that. And also had some published papers actually during that time, and also my first published image, I guess, in photography was on the Alfalfa Weevil project, where I shot some different pictures of weevils laying eggs and that type of thing. It was published in some of the extension publications. And while I was here at Purdue, also there was a kind of a connection with UK, because UK and Bobby Pass down in Purdue and UK were doing research together. Bobby Pass was working on alfalfa weevils down there, and we worked together in some research plots down in southern Indiana. And so I kind of got a UK-Purdue connection at that point. And then went on and did my graduate work at Iowa State. Well, when I finished at Iowa State, I got a lot of field research there also. And so I had a lot of people to interview for jobs, because a lot of opportunities opened up where I'd had a lot of field research, and I published papers at Iowa State and published papers at Purdue. And so that did open up a lot of opportunities for me. So I interviewed in different parts of the United States. And I was getting job offers from Nebraska and from California, where my wife didn't want to move to, and other parts of the United States. But UK kept asking me to come down there, and Bobby Passes wanted me to come down there and work with them. And so I ended up going down to UK and working with the University of Kentucky in Bobby Passes' program down there. And also Bobby had me set up a photography, I guess a kind of a departmental photography lab area, allowed me to buy equipment, that type of thing. So that was kind of one of the starts. Also getting things right, I guess, was doing that. And of course we were working with slides then, so there was a lot of things you needed to produce for extensions, for other publications too, where you were shooting slides. And if you might remember trying to shoot slides, you really had to be exact on what you were doing, because light, if you're using flash or any kind of light, the fall off is an inverse square. So if you have something that's 4 inches away as opposed to 8 inches away, you get like 4 times less light at 8 inches away than 4 inches away. So a matter of a couple inches can make a difference when you're trying to get a correct exposure. So there was a lot of trial and error in getting that right and trying to set up a proper way, I guess, get the correct exposures multiple times at different magnifications in the field, in the lab, whatever. So there was a lot of work, and took a lot of types of work. And also I was introduced to the tropics because I did some work with Paul Freitag, and we did some work with biodiversity studies in different areas, particularly through Central America and South America, and looking at new species and finding new species. And I found a new genus in Peru and other areas that we were working in. So I kind of opened up Pandora's box, I guess, and I saw a lot of the diversity in the tropics and a lot of the areas and a lot of photographic opportunities in the tropics too. And in research down in these areas, you can see my shirt. Can you read my shirt? Save Entomology Hall with it. But we were down there you would eat a lot of rice and beans. I always thought you could go down to South America for 2 or 3 weeks and eat tremendous amounts of rice and beans and always lose weight, because you're always working down there and eating rice and beans and spending a lot of time out in the field. And we would drive all over Central America, South America, set up light traps, set up on the side of a hillside, sometimes drape a sheet over the side of the vehicle and plug it in the cigarette lighter and collect. And so we were collecting and sweeping and running all types of traps all through different areas of South America. So I kind of caught the tropical bug, I guess, at that point. I really liked to go in and photograph in these areas because I found the diversity really fascinating, and the subject's almost unlimited. So that was really great. And this is my sister, and my sister actually did still help me later, because some of these trips I would go all by myself, and she would go with me, and she would kind of hold the lights for me, because a lot of times you're trying to photograph in the rainforest at night, you need some light to focus by. So she would hold the lights for me and help me, and she would assist me, and she was good to travel with. We got stuck one time in Colombia, and so we were on our way to Ecuador, so we weren't even supposed to be there. So she helped me out in lots of areas in South America, Central America, and also in Africa. She went with Africa too. And unfortunately she got married, and that kind of screwed all that stuff up. But she got married, and so she didn't travel with me quite as much anymore. But she now is in Indianapolis, and she works for the Indianapolis school system. So that's where she's at now. The places we would go to and places we would stay in the tropics, how many of you have traveled to the tropics and been to any of these areas? No, okay, about 5, only about 5. Not too many, not too many. So if you've stayed in some of these areas in the tropics, you know some of the times it's not exactly the best accommodations. Usually I always thought it was a good place to stay if the roof didn't leak, you know. If the roof was sound, it wasn't too bad a place to stay. Because you know, you only need kind of a place to set up your equipment, a place to go ahead and process specimens and that type of thing. If you've got a roof that doesn't leak and a table, pretty much you're set. You know, everything else you can supply on your own. So these, also in the early years, I went collecting with Milan. And somebody said Milan had mentioned the fact that I helped him out, bringing back some of the specimens for the Cincinnati Zoo. And Milan's always trying to bring them back alive, bringing back things alive. And so it's kind of interesting while you're doing some of this stuff and how you try to keep specimens alive for a certain period of time. I remember one trip we were coming back and we were bringing back live butterflies. That was when you had to go find your own butterflies, collect the butterflies, bring them back, and then start them in your butterfly houses. Now you can just order them over the internet. You can just order any type of butterfly, really mostly South American and African butterflies for the butterfly houses. But we were collecting the live butterflies and putting them in envelopes and then keeping them alive. And we were supposed to stop at Miami for a certain period of time and actually feed the butterflies while we were in Miami on the way back to the zoo. So we were collecting those and collecting beetles. And some of my collections in my personal collection came from some of the things we were collecting, because if we put insects in together and they didn't get along too well, we didn't have cages, they would end up in a collection rather than in the zoo. So with working with Milan, this is some of our team here collecting some of the bugs. We brought back a lot of butterflies and some of the harlequin beetles and some of the Hercules beetles and leafcutter ant colonies. We go out and dig up small leafcutter ant colonies to bring back live leafcutters for the museum or the zoo exhibit. So we were working in these areas. One thing though, I learned a lot about lighting too, because lighting, again, you're trying to figure out your lighting when you're trying to shoot slides, and this was shot on the trip, and you can see this is shot available light. The next shot was shot with flash, and you can see there's such a big difference between the two. You know, you're trying to figure out what you want to do, how you want to do it, and also, again, when you're shooting these things, you don't see the results immediately. You know, it's not like when you shoot digital now, where you can see, oh, this didn't work out. You had to shoot it, and then you had to find out when you got back what it's going to look like. And so walking around the rainforest, shooting at night, you're trying to figure your flash exposures, because you know how much reflective light you're getting from this distance and whether you can put the f-stop of this or that. And it depends, like, again, on if it's a dark subject or a light subject, and it's kind of opposite what you have to figure out now with the light meters you have inside the camera. It's actually opposite TTL or ETL metering with manual flash as it is with in-camera metering. And so you took a lot of notes. So you're always taking notes and say, oh yeah, this day I shot this, and exposure this, exposure number 24 I did this, and exposure number 25 I did this. And so you got back, when you got back and looked at your products weeks later, you could figure out what worked and what didn't. And so you're trying to improve your photography in that way. And so that's kind of different, like I said, than digital, because that really also, digital kind of opened up the field to everybody. If you weren't really meticulous on note taking, you really weren't very good a lot of times on close-up photography with slides, because you only had that one shot, and if you're a stop or so off, then the image isn't going to come out. But you'd also find out, looking at the slides, let's say what was good and what was bad. You'd look at exposure, but also color, because at that time you had different types of films. And you had some daylight balanced films, you had tungsten balanced films, and you had white balanced on the different films was different too. So you're trying to figure all this out. And there's a big learning curve on this, trying to figure out exactly what's the best way to do this. And this is one I shot, and I put it as an Olympus flash, full power, f32. So I would keep those notes on the slides and write them on the slides when they came back from processing, so I knew what exposures each one was shot at. This is another one from that trip. So I kind of learned the care and feeding, I guess, of my camera and how to shoot and what to do and how to shoot in the tropics. And we were talking earlier about silica gel packs. We did take silica gel packs. We took the ones that would actually heat up and they change colors. And so you would heat them up at home and then go ahead and seal them up and then bring them back, and you start having a camera start acting kind of funny or funky. You go ahead and take the lens off, put it inside of a plastic bag with a silica gel, close it up, let it sit overnight. French Guiana is one of the places I had really the most problem at that time with probably some of the cameras. We started getting electronics in the camera. They started going haywire with all the electronics. They started really going bad. And also the tropics affects other things. Because of the lights, like say the focus lights we would be using, we would use those mag lights, which are nice little lights. They work great. And if you ever had to replace a bulb on a mag light, which is very, very seldom you ever replace a bulb, well, I blew like 4 bulbs in a week, because the humidity was just so high, it would just eat away at the equipment. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Belize, in an area which was more humid than I thought it was going to be, and so I was there for about 12 days, and I had some lens problems too. It was mostly fogging because it was so cool at night and warmed up so quick in the daytime that we were getting fogging of our lenses. So we had to warm the lenses up pretty quickly first thing in the morning, otherwise they start fogging up. But the care and feeding your camera, he was learning care and feeding of his specimens he was collecting too. So he was feeding, in this case it looks like he's probably feeding some beetles, because it looks like he's got some bananas there. But he was learning, I guess, how to set up for the live bugs he was working with. But also I'm not sure he was too good at care and feeding his helpers, because I know that we were there the first 2 days, we had 6 meals, and we had macaroni and cheese 6 meals in a row. So at that time we decided it was time to go into town and buy some different food, because Mylan didn't plan quite as good as we had thought. He wasn't really the gourmet chef. He was there just basic substance, that was it. And Tom, if you remember when he was here, I think John used to complain about him eating cereal for every meal of the day or something like that. Yeah. So kind of today I work in urban entomology mostly. I still work in the tropics some, but I'm a board certified entomologist in urban and general entomology, and so I work a lot in urban entomology. I own All Right Pest Control, as they said. I'm not there every day as I used to be. Now I have a daughter who, luckily, she got a degree in business, and so she does a lot of the work at the office, and I'm more involved, I guess, in special problems, special projects, buying of vehicles, of advertising, and that type of thing. So I don't have to go in the office every day, which they don't want to see me every day anyway. And I like to be able to be flexible enough that if I want to go to Belize for 12 days, or if I want to go to Africa for 2 weeks or something like that, then I'm free to do that. So I've tried to develop my business and give responsibility to people and let them, I guess, give them the permission to be successful and give them a permission to fail. Because they have to have the knowledge to know that if they fail, that they're not going to be held completely responsible for what they've done. Otherwise, they won't try at all. So I had to train my staff, I guess, to be able to work without me. We work a lot with UK and have worked with UK quite a bit on termite control products. A lot of the early testing of Terminor we did. In fact, they say we were the first company in the United States to actually put down Terminor. And we did a lot of work with some of the early baiting systems for termites, working with Mike Potter. Also did some backyard mosquito control work for a couple of years with Grayson Brown down there too, working with some of his grad students, and we were applying the products and he was doing all the testing and that type of thing. And now we work a lot on bed bugs and work with Mike Potter on bed bugs and trying to look at different control measures, etc., with Potter. And we find some of the infested areas sometimes, good areas to do research, and then work with Mike on this and set up the programs on what needs to be done in these areas. This actually was taken in account. This was one way to win in. They had the stuff all over the place, and this was actually on the bumpers of a baby bed. And these bugs were just sitting there. This baby bed was infested with bed bugs. Every single crack and crevice, and even if you turn the bed up and inside the rollers and every screw hole was infested with bed bugs. And so I would hate to have seen the baby that actually slept in there. We didn't see that. They were gone when we came in there. But you can get into tremendous infestations of bed bugs. And you get into these, especially elderly housing sometimes too, which are really cluttered environment. And I think that's one of the problems, I'm sure that Gary agrees, that a lot of the problems we have now with bed bugs, why it's so much worse than it was in the 30s, is that our homes are so much more cluttered than they were in the 30s. You know, in the 30s you had just maybe a throw rug, maybe a little bit of furniture, and not that much stuff. And now we just accumulate so much stuff in our homes, and when the bed bugs come in and start living in all these cracks and crevices and areas in our stuff, it's really hard to get rid of them. And so that is a big problem with bed bugs. And like Mike likes to say, sleeping with the enemy. Now, I don't know if anybody's seen this. This may be kind of preferred or kind of confidential, but Mike and I are working on this suit that you can use that you can sleep in, and this will keep bed bugs off of you while you're sleeping. And this is a picture of the suit that we're developing. So we may need some trials. So if anyone wants to volunteer for trials, we can go ahead and do that later. But I kept working, still working with Freitag, Dr. Freitag, in the tropical areas. Even after I left university and I was running my business, I still worked a lot with him in the tropical areas and continued in the collecting bug. I continued collecting insects, collecting different types of specimens from different types of trips. You would, of course, bring these specimens home. You would put them in your wife's freezer. You would try to pull them out and pin them every now and then. And you have another trip and put more in the freezer. And so finally she made me buy my own freezer because there wasn't room for anything else in the freezer. So I have a big freezer down in the basement. Then a lot of bugs that still need to be pinned. So if anybody's good at that needs to pin a lot of bugs and wants to work part-time, let me know. But I also had the photo bug, which I really enjoyed photographing in the tropical areas. Like I say, it was really diverse. It was really interesting. And I guess if you've been to the tropics and as an entomologist, you find a lot of exciting things to do in those areas, and a lot of exciting things to see, things you've never seen before. Of course, things a lot of people have never seen before. And that always kind of challenged me too. I'd like to try to photograph insects alive, doing something, or you know, even some type of behavior, photograph that insect alive, which may have never even been seen alive before, only seen in a collection someplace, some type of a museum. But actually get that photograph of that insect alive, I thought was really challenging to do that. Did a lot of the work mostly in the tropical rainforest to be an entomologist. Again, a lot of South America, Central America, Central Africa, those areas, down into Madagascar. I've been to Madagascar 2 or 3 times. Over into Indonesia, into Borneo, Papua New Guinea, and those areas. So I've kind of worked and studied and photographed and collected in all those areas throughout the band of the tropical rainforest. This is in the canopy down in South America. But working in these areas, it is, again, great. We talked to some of the students today who are from Honduras and from Colombia in these areas. And as I said, getting in there at some of these areas is a real chore. I know when we went into Peru, I remember there's one road in particular going into Peru. It was one way into the jungle Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and came out of the jungle Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or something like this. I guess Sunday was free reign. I don't know. But I mean, there are certain days you're supposed to be going in, and certain days you're supposed to be going out. Unfortunately, not everybody got the memo, and sometimes you'd be going in on this road, which is, like I say, very, very narrow road for one passenger, one car, and you'd meet somebody else coming the other direction. You'd have to kind of back off in a little crevice. You can see numerous little crosses on the side of the road, or places the road had slid away, and those places you're driving along. So traveling through some of these areas is kind of difficult doing that. But it still is a very enjoyable, very fulfilling work coming into these areas and exploring. And a lot of times when you're photographing, when I'm photographing, you know, I may only go 100 yards an entire day. Start out doing a trail, you find something you're interested in, start photographing, go a little bit farther, find something else, you turn around, there's something else, and so you're down on the ground, you're up photographing, mostly down on the ground photographing these areas, and you're finding really interesting things. And say you can spend an entire day in 100 yards along a trail. See a lot of other things to photograph, some of the snakes and some of the frogs in some of these areas. This is one of the ones that was on National Geographic's calendars with some of the tree frogs I had photographed. And some of the poison dart frogs or poison arrow frogs. I think some of these were probably in Colombia. And the different types of vegetation. I've had different requests too. When you go into these areas, someone's asking me about shooting on a sign, but sometimes you will have requests from a magazine say, oh, we need pictures of buttress roots, or we need pictures of the leaves and how they shed water, or we need pictures of this or that. So I'll get requests when I go into photographs from these areas on different requirements that certain publications might need. So I'll be doing shooting, trying to fulfill some of those assignments. But mostly I'm in there to photograph some of the insects. And I know you've seen some of the insects, so there's some of the photographs that the department has, and also I guess on their website now they have different types of photographs that I've shot, and they put these on the website. So all these were shot in different areas here in the rainforest areas. And I enjoy doing that. Again, it's trying to figure out that light and how you're going to put the light on the particular specimen, how it's going to reflect or how it's going to fill in or what it's going to do, and also trying to do all this while the insect's wanting to move. And you're working with a depth of field that's probably in the millimeters, you know. And if you take a breath at the wrong time, the picture's worthless. You know, it's not sharp. And so you're trying to work in those areas. So it does take kind of a steady nerves, I guess, one thing, and trying to brace yourself, trying to hold, trying to get the area in focus that you want to get in focus. And so it is kind of a challenging work. And someone asked before, is there a market for this? Well, I mean, what do you do with these pictures? And I mean, I sell to a lot of different markets, I guess. And when you're selling and you're doing stuff, you kind of have to figure out who you're going to trust, because you could easily send people pictures and they'll use your pictures and not send you any money. So that's a problem. So I always watermark pictures whenever I send them out for approval. And they go to some area and they have watermarks on them, so that way they can't really easily use them unless they start removing the watermarks from the images. And that always happens when I'm sending out to somebody that calls me up and says, hey, we need this picture, and can we get this? And so I'll go ahead and send them a sample of images with watermarks on them. They'll decide which ones they want, and then I'll go ahead and do a final sizing on the image and go ahead and send it to them. And it depends on who it is. If it's somebody I know, I'll send them the image, and they'll go ahead and use the image and send me a check. If somebody I don't know, then I'll say, okay, this is the image. You've seen the proof. Do you want the image? I say, yes. I say, what's your credit card number? And so they'll give me a credit card number or some kind of number, so I'll go ahead and charge it before I actually deliver it electronically to them, because it's easy to send an image, hard to get a check sometimes. So sometimes you have to wait for them to go ahead and decide to send that, so that's easier for me, especially in people I don't know. And I have done work on CD-ROMs, I've done flashcards, playing cards, books, jigsaw puzzles, scientific guides. These are pictures from a scientific guide that I did work with Gary Bennett. And do a lot of stuff for magazines. I can't really tell you how many different magazine covers I've done. That's like a termite in Brazil, and a carpenter ant in my backyard, and then a cockroach from French Guiana. And you know, entomologists are one of the few people that they say, oh, there's bugs in your room. They're excited about it. Instead of changing rooms, they want to go in there and find out what they are. And these are flies. Actually, I shot those flies on my dad's front porch. PCT called me up, said, we need pictures from flies. Okay, I'm going up to Indiana. So I set some bread out set some bread out there, put something on the bread, wait till the flies come in, shoot the flies, send it to the magazine, sell it to the magazine. So it depends, I guess, on what you're shooting and where you can go ahead and shoot. I've sold tremendous amounts of rodent pictures. I'm surprised. I guess nobody else photographs rodents. But I've had a lot of covers of magazines with rodents on them. Done a lot of stuff for American entomologists on their covers through the years, I guess. Quite a few covers for them. And again, Madagascar, Brazil, Costa Rica on those. That's one in my backyard again. Another one from Africa, the weevil. And I guess the chrysomelid, I think, is also Costa Rican too. And there's Africa and Borneo, Venezuela, and those covers. So a lot of different covers. I do a lot of calendars too. I can't really tell you how many different photos I've had on the ESA calendar. I know I have 3 or 4 this year. But I've done a lot of pictures for ESA calendars too, and other calendars too, that Some of them are complete calendars that they've hired me to do a complete calendar where I've shot this for, or sometimes parts of calendars. It kind of depends on who the vendor is or who the market is. And in photography too, I do shoot people. I photograph people. Sorry, I don't shoot. I photograph people also, but I do things inside too. Because if you're going to a meeting, when I'm going to a meeting anyway, I'll call some of the magazines too, and I say, are you going to be there? And they say, well, no. Well, can you shoot some pictures for us? So it's good to check with them before you go to some of these meetings, particularly if you go to an international meeting. Like if you're going to an international congress overseas, they're not likely to be able to afford to send somebody over there. If you're going over there anyway, then I go ahead and photograph in some of these areas, photograph the people, photograph what's going on, and sell some of those pictures back to the magazines when I come back. And so that works out well for me too. And sometimes the universities also use these pictures whenever they're trying to go ahead and put in brochures together for the next year or whatever. They use these pictures. So sometimes you kind of look for interesting angles and interesting backgrounds and that type of thing when you're trying to shoot the pictures, and so that you have a human interest factor in these. Also, we have trade booths. We have other ad items that we use, and you can see some of my photographs there. I guess all my photographs, lots of my photographs, in the background of the trade booths. We add interest to some of the booths that we set up. It may be bigger shows, smaller shows. We do shows with, I guess, suppliers. Sometimes we do with staff at schools. We do different types of trade shows. It may be just a small booth, it may be a large booth. But we use my photographs in that type of thing. And also, our trucks, we shoot, and so these are shot in particular for a particular use. So I'm shooting these against a white background, so they'll be easy to pull out because these are going on a truck. And so all the vehicles that I have are some of them have bees and wasps, some of them have ants, some of them have bed bugs, some of them have spiders, one of them has beetles. So each truck has different insects on this particular truck. We're doing one now that's coming out, it's going to have ticks on it. And so it depends, and I shoot these pictures for the trucks that we put out on the road. Work a lot with the school system. We worked a lot with the Young Explorers program around Lexington, where they had kind of urban city kids were learning about nature, and so we worked a lot with that. I work with the Living Arts and Science Center a lot, and the Children's Museum, others, where we put on programs for that. And we work with science fairs in Fayette County, especially the big regional science fairs. Work with a lot of science fair judging areas, and county fairs sometimes. We'll go ahead and set up exhibits there, but different types of things. We'll bring in some of the bugs that I've collected in different parts of the world, and also some display sometimes of photographs. So a lot of this is worked into my pest control business. Now, light is photography. So kind of knowing how to master light and change light and modify it and getting the right angles, that's pretty much what photography is. And so probably that's pretty much my whole talk, is getting light in the right places. So we can stop here or we can keep going. But at the end, we'll go ahead and talk about getting to some of these pictures. Lighting, you can use different types of lighting. Direct lighting, reflected lighting, diffused lighting, depending on what you're trying to emphasize, how you're trying to shoot the insect or the subject. Direct lighting, like side lighting, you can use it a lot of times to show texture. So by using side lighting, you show texture and also detail by doing side lighting. And that's really good if you have an insect that has spines, or that has some type of CD, or that has scales of butterflies and moths. It works well to use some type of a side lighting to show the texture. Also, you can see on this penguin, I hope it comes out, pretty good. You can see the detail of the feathers, where it's coming into a sharp side light. You can see the detail, so it does show that by bringing in a strong side light. Now, kind of just understanding diffused light. Diffused light, it's softer. It's softer. This was shot in Papua New Guinea, one of the places we were staying. We were staying with this tribe. We stayed with about 3 different tribes over about a month period of time, but it was kind of used to diffuse light from all the fog. And diffused light is it reduces contrast, and it softens shadows. So there's certain subjects you may want to shoot more in diffused light because just of the nature of the subject. Also, you can diffuse light yourself. So if you're trying to diffuse light yourself, if you're trying to photograph flowers, insects on flowers, that type of thing, you can diffuse light by using these diffusers. That folds up into that little pouch, and it's kind of clear, but you can hold it over top of something and it softens the light, gives you an effect, especially if you're trying to shoot in a field in the middle of the day. If you're going into a cornfield, soybean field, whatever, and it's midday, you get really harsh shadows. By using one of these and having a grad student hold it over the top of this area, you can go ahead and diffuse the light and you get more detail in the shadows of your subject. So that helps. You can also reflect light, reflect the sun back into these areas. Again, you have an insect, it's in strong shadow. You reflect light back in that area, you fill the shadow up, and so you get more detail. You don't have the sharp dividing line between the shadows and the highlights. But reflected light does a great job on that. Also, if you have things underneath the leaves, you can't get enough light underneath of a leaf, you can put some kind of a reflector under there, and that will reflect the light back underneath of that area to light that area up. And you can get different colors of these. You can get silvers, you can get golds, depending on what kind of light you want to reflect actually into those areas. And it works really well. I've used it a lot on caterpillars. When you're shooting caterpillars that are kind of still, that may be underneath of a leaf, you can use reflectors to do that. You can also use any type of a reflector like a small mirror. I have small pocket mirrors I carry sometimes. Even index cards work well in reflecting light up into these areas. Polarized light, again working with light, polarizers polarize light. You know how it is, and it takes reflections off of water. But also an important thing in insect photography, it takes reflections off of leaves. So if you're shooting the rainforest, you can use a polarizer and it will take the reflection off the leaves. Now some of the times when you're shooting amphibians and frogs, you can cross-polarize light. And cross-polarization means you're polarizing your light from your flash one direction, polarizing the lens a different direction. And it really cuts down the reflections on those, particularly say the poison arrow frogs. It also, you lose about 5 stops of light too, doing that. So you have to have really powerful flashes to use that. I have these little pocket flashlights I use, these really intense flashlights, which work well too to light up an area. You use a little flashlight to light up dark areas. You can shoot with those. They have a nice color balance on them. You can use it as either a main light or also as a fill light, depending on the distance. You can easily see the effects and move those around. Those work really well on small subjects too. And of course, flashes are the main, I guess, equipment you need for insect photography, because you're working at such small apertures and you're creating darkness as you go into different magnifications, and so you really need a flash. When you're working with flashes too, it's getting it off the camera, trying to get the flash off the camera, because you can't get that side light where the flash is on the camera. You do direct flat on light, and a lot of times the subject looks very flat. It's nice to pull the flash off to the side to go ahead and get that directed light that you need. And you can also get different kinds of snoots and diffusers and other things to do that. Now, holding the flash, there's different types of brackets, again, you can get to go ahead and hold that flash, so you don't have to have an assistant holding it out here, to hold the flash and to bracket it. I like these little brackets here. These work well. These are Wimberley brackets, and they are tear-down brackets, so they don't take quite as much room in your luggage when you're doing this. So these work real well, the Wimberley brackets. Yeah, but they make all kinds of different brackets. Wimberley makes a lot of different types of brackets, and I've gone in and out and used different types of brackets over time. Some of them, you kind of start getting loose over time, particularly holding big flashes. You're trying to get a lot of light in there. And so I've gone through experiments with different types of brackets. I'm using some of the really bright stuff brackets now. They're really hard, stiff, but they hold really well. They clamp on the plates on your cameras. So there's different types of things you can use to hold those flashes. There are also specialized macro flash units, which are made for macro photography. And they will go ahead and fit onto your lens. That's a little collar that goes on the end of the lens. And they'll go ahead and move back and forth and with your camera. As you change magnifications, they move back and forth with the camera. And that's one thing I found out when I was shooting with film, too. You're shooting slide film. As you change your magnification, you're of course moving the lights closer, and you're having to move closer. You're losing f-stops through the lens. As it starts moving out, you're starting to lose f-stops, but you're starting to gain f-stops as you're getting closer to it. And so really there's kind of a trade-off in that, and it really doesn't change quite as much as you would think as you change magnifications. They have specialized ring lights. I don't use ring lights that much. I don't like the reflections they give. But when you're in a really tight space and you may want to shoot, try to not get any shadows, they kind of work. I've got some. I just don't use them that much, but ring lights are good. And bank bags are good to keep all your money in. But if you have any money, you have to buy all this stuff. But they're good to keep diffusers in. Diffusers are good, again, diffusing the big flash heads to try to get some softer diffusion. All of my stuff has Velcro on it, and I stick to myself all the time. But they have Velcro to stick these diffusers on. So I have different types of diffusers. I've experimented with those through the years. You can find bigger ones, smaller ones. Diffusers are used a lot in portrait photography by all the professionals that shoot all the models and shoot all the celebrities. They use these big diffusers to do this. Well, a diffuser in the relationship to the size of a bug is pretty darn big. You know, they have a diffuser this big they're going to shoot a picture of a person with, but the diffuser in the size of the bug is pretty good. So it gives you a wraparound light for one thing when you're trying to shoot the bug. It also cuts down on reflection some too. So diffusers are really important trying to shoot bugs. Adam, do you use diffusers?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, not yet. Maybe later. They have some pop-on diffusers help more in photographing people and getting bounce light off. Don't help that much with bugs. It's better than nothing though. They have little ones that go on some of the macro flashes too. Also, if you have a pop-up flash, some people have pop-up flashes, and they also have diffusers you can either make or use. Gary Fong makes some of these that you can also use on pop-up flashes, which help to diffuse that. If you've got a camera like that and you want to get close but you can't get the light down in front of the lens, they actually have diffusers you can use to do that. When working with bugs, trying to get down and getting down at eye level is kind of important. I like to shoot at eye level. If you've seen some of my pictures, I kind of like this where you're shooting down at eye level, and trying to get down at eye level is kind of difficult because you're trying to get down on low areas, rocky areas. Sometimes there may be some scorpions or other things down there. So I have knee pads and Gore-Tex pants, which I never travel the tropics without. The knee pads are very helpful. You know, not only not having to watch where you're kneeling down, but also the fact that it keeps your knees from getting all bruised up and banged up and sore when you're there for a couple of weeks. Gore-Tex pants are great because you can waller around in the mud or the leaves and everything else and not get so, I guess, gunked up where you have to try to wash all these clothes, because nothing dries out in the rainforest anyway. Cotton particularly. Anything's cotton, it don't dry out. It's going to be wet for days. But trying to get eye level, even with penguins, trying to get down at eye level, they're kind of short. Some of them are short, some are tall, but trying to get down and shoot at eye level, you know, I think it's kind of important. And so I'm down on the ground a lot. And Steve was saying he thought I kept in pretty good shape. Well, you're up and down and up and down and up and down. You're carrying all this stuff. You're packing it up into areas. You're jumping off of zodiacs. You're doing all this stuff. So you have to kind of stay in good shape to try to get into these areas and get down low and photograph and what you want trying to photograph. And this is a black-browed albatross, and you know, she's taking care of her chick. Now this one's probably not as big. This one probably has a wingspan of probably about 8 feet. When there's wandering albatross is a lot bigger than this, but this is a pretty big bird when they're coming flying over your head and you're trying to get out and shoot their chicks. Working with any type of animals, insects, rhinos, whatever, there's a comfort zone of that particular animal. You know, how close can you get to this animal before it's going to start reacting negatively? And you can find out that some animals don't really have a comfort zone. You know, these emperor penguins had never really seen people before. They didn't know who I was. The little chick comes over and lays on my leg. It was warm for him and warm for me both. But you know, they didn't really have any comfort zone. You had to watch out because anything you set down, they'd come over and start looking at it and pecking at it and trying to see what it was. And other things, again, may not have a comfort zone. Trying to photograph in Madagascar and a lemur jumps on my head. And here I've got the MPE lens, which you cannot, with that lens in particular, you cannot shoot anything in focus that's more than 4 inches away from you. So if it's more than 4 inches away, you can't focus on it. So this did me a whole lot of good with this lemur on my head. Luckily somebody else shot the picture for me. But you have to figure out what your comfort zone is too. You know, not only insects, but what's your comfort zone when you're trying to photograph this stuff. You know, how nervous are you going to be? Or you can get the shot if you're trying to come in there and get the shot of this particular animal or bug or whatever. You know, you can't really photograph a scorpion on the side of the tree if you're afraid to get within 6 feet of that scorpion on the side of the tree. So you have to figure that on yourself, like what your own comfort zone is, and also sometimes what kind of equipment you need to have with you, you know, to keep in your comfort zone and the animal's comfort zone, whether it's a telephoto lens or whether it's some type of other gear that you're going to each be outside the other's comfort zone when you're trying to photograph. This was shot with a 500mm lens, so this was farther away than a shot with this. But this was 2 weeks ago when I was in Central America. Again, what are you comfortable with? This is me shooting the cave, and I was talking about the little video lights before. This is using one of the video lights to use a little rechargeable video light, which is my focusing light, so it's on, so I can focus. Another one of the people shot this picture of me, and also they shot this picture of me with the tailless whip scorpion on my head too. But you know, again, it's what's your comfort zone, I guess, whenever you're trying to shoot around some of these creatures. To me, not too bad. Most of the bugs I can tolerate. Some other things I can't tolerate. I can tolerate spiders. I have 3 of them I feed, you know, about once every couple of weeks. So you know, you just have to kind of know what you're dealing with, what areas you can get, and also getting the right angle. You know, I wanted this angle. This is the angle I wanted to shoot from. So I wanted to get in the position where I could get this shot. And so a lot of times you're looking through the lens of the camera, not paying attention to reality. My wife always says I have to be careful about reality, what's going on around me sometimes too. I've known a lot of photographers that have gone into photograph events and not paid attention. They're living through the lens of the camera, and it could be a riot. It could be they're shooting a bucking bull in the middle of a ring, and they're not paying attention to what's going on around them, because sometimes you're seeing a distorted view through your camera lens. Now, shooting in the field. You need to travel light. Sometimes you can't travel light, depending on what type of equipment you're taking with you. A lot of stuff is heavy, and a lot of stuff you need. So there's certain pieces of equipment, big cameras, which are sealed well against moisture, have long-lasting batteries, certain macro lenses, maybe sometimes a telephoto lens that I need. So I don't really need that many clothes, so I leave my clothes behind, or I don't really need, you know, some other stuff, so I may not take it. But I want to make sure I have what I need. You're going in some of these areas. This is the type of thing, we're taking a generator, but you're going in some of these areas, you're not going to be able to get replacement parts. So if you need extra spark plugs, you need extra oil. I've got lights inside of lens tubes. You know, you have to really make out a list of what you're going to pack and pack them in advance. When I'm traveling in some of these areas, I have separate lists. I have a generator list. This is why I need to take, I'm taking a generator. Then I have a collecting list. Am I collecting? I take this stuff. Then I have a photography list. And, you know, I have certain lists that I take, and so I know all these things I need to take when I go in there, because I can guarantee you that if you get down in the middle of French Guiana, they do not have bulbs for mag lights, you know. So actually I started switching to Pelican lights because they're underwater lights, but they work better. But you have to know what you're taking when you're going up in these areas and going down through these areas. This is Papua New Guinea, and we're traveling back into some of these areas, and we should have had a chainsaw, I guess, when we're going into these areas. But we were taking care of all of our food. We were taking care of our water supplies, boiling our water, or pumping our water. So we had everything we needed, even had a snack along the way, so that we were set up to go ahead and have what we needed when we were there. But photographing in the field, you know, you need to have the equipment that you need at the time, plus you need to know how to use it. It doesn't do you any good to go in the field with new equipment that you haven't tried out. So I would tell anybody that has bought photographic equipment, test it out, try it out, use it quite a bit before you go into these areas, because you're trying to get the lighting the way you want it, you're trying to get the focus the way you want it, and you really don't need to be concentrating on how to figure out changing the apertures on your camera. Or if there's something happening very quickly, you need to know how to adjust to that and do that very quickly. These are some turtle ants, and it shows one of them in the hole and the other one getting ready to go in the hole. But I wanted to photograph that with a certain type of light so I could, you know, see the details and see what was going on in the relationship with this. In the field, you can get up close. Again, entomologists and photographers are probably the only ones that let insects come and bite them just so they can get great photos. But it's easier to photograph something biting you than it is biting someone else, because they're not holding still. Getting great light on this velvet mite. If you try to shoot velvet mites, they continue to move and continue to go very quickly. So trying to get the right light, the right conditions, the right magnifications to get everything in focus sometimes is a chore. And then trying to get soft light in the middle of the day sometimes is a chore. Taking it inside. So sometimes we do take stuff inside, and we do photograph them inside. So we'll photograph insects. This is on a tomato, so this just happened to be laying on the counter, and it was my parents' house. And this was just a forward fly that flew in. Now we're taking that inside. And here we have, you know what this is, right? We got one person said yes. What is this? One person knows what this is. Okay, it's a cockroach egg case. So it shows higher magnification, shows the detail in this. I showed this to somebody and they thought it was cherry pie at one time. Not quite, but I mean, trying to get the detail and trying to get the shadows right, trying to get the color right as you're trying to shoot this particular insect. And you know, a lot of times if you go ahead and show these pictures to some people, then there's more detail than they've ever seen on some of these bugs. So it's really interesting when you show these images that people really like this. And I thought about when I was talking about the department using photographs, whether I should have showed them some of these insects on white or not, but Steve was overloaded with choices when I sent him the other stuff, so he was trying to pick out from the other. But I like these insects on white, where they're very simple and where you show a lot of color on the bugs. And like I say, I like leafhoppers. I shoot a lot of leafhoppers because they have such great color patterns, but other insects too. And you can really get high interest and show good detail in some of these bugs if you go ahead and have a controlled lighting environment, even though sometimes the bugs don't cooperate. But anyway, you can still get a lot of good pictures. Now, wildlife shoot. This is a wildlife shoot, and you may recognize this. This is a wildlife shoot in New York City. Okay, New York City rats. And I was shooting, did use some of these with Scientific Guide. Oregon State also bought some of these. New Orleans Vector Control, National Pest Management Association. Different people bought these. When I'm shooting wildlife shots, I like to try to shoot single shots of some of the animals, but also like to try to shoot, besides the singles, try to shoot kind of group dynamics and behavior when you're trying to shoot this. You can see the wound on this particular rat where another one's attacked it. Here's a mother with some babies, and here's the two fighting. So you're trying to do that, trying to shoot group dynamics while you're shooting the animals. So you're trying to figure out what these pictures are going to be used for. I sell a lot of pictures to National Pest Management Association. They have a lot of stuff that they buy from general pest insects that may be causing problems. This was brown recluse, of course, shot in somebody's basement. And then here's another insect on white, so it shows more detail. So it kind of depends on what they're asking or what they want. A lot of times it may be some insect or some topic that's came up that they need at the time. So they may be calling me up and asking me and saying, hey, we have a certain insect that we need, and it may be news of today. Some kind of bug that's just coming out, and then they get requests for pictures of that particular bug. It may be termite season, and they need pictures of termites for termite season. Or again, it may be just some type of an insect that's causing problems, maybe for TV. So sometimes I size stuff for TV because it goes to them as 1080p, so they can use it on high definition TV as well as using in newspapers. So I size for that type of thing. This, USA Today just bought some crazy ant pictures from me. So you learn what you need to shoot to do the job. You learn shooting in your own backyard. This is kind of my own backyard. This is Yellowstone. But shooting in your backyard, Glacier National Park, some of the parks you can get up close to animals, learn how to shoot animals, try to get in close to the animals. This is my backyard. This is one of the ones on your website. But you can learn in your backyard. And again, this is a bug on my arm. I'm trying to shoot this bug, this deer fly biting me as I'm trying to get the insect in focus. And but shooting around your backyard, you pick up a lot of information on how to use your equipment, how to get the right shot, how to get the lighting right, how to get the perspective correct, how to use your lens, how to capture the insect or arthropod, and get the shot that you want. Learn magnification, trying to shoot some insects that are very small. You have to learn what your camera will do, showing different types of behavior again. Or this is showing the fluorescence of the scorpion. General insect photos. But I've got into more shooting threatened and endangered species. And for that you really need to hike into some of these areas. And shooting gorillas in Uganda, where you're hiking up in 5 hours up to go ahead and get up into these areas and photograph the gorillas, and then it starts raining just when you get there. Or going to some of the ends of the earth where you're taking icebreakers into Antarctica. And I've gone into there 3 different times on icebreakers. You're traveling by helicopter, you're landing in these areas 30 minutes away from the boat. If a storm comes up, they set these little tents up just in case. And you're shooting in very, very bad conditions sometimes too, in very cold conditions. But you get some great shots. And so really it's worth going into some of these areas. And some of these areas, they're experiencing climate change, and you're documenting some of these areas, the climate change in these areas, but you're getting good shots. You're always you have to know how your equipment works to be able to get shots like this so that you can get these published later or even just have these shots. You have to do a lot of work on these. The top of the world did a lot of work in the Arctic, particularly wildlife shoots in the Arctic. In these areas, Greenland, northern Canada, getting there can be half the fun, I guess. But when when the stewardess has a parka on, that you're going into some areas that are pretty darn cold. And living up with off Greenland on the ice for about a week was a big experience when the temperature was 0 to -15 below 0. And learning how your equipment works under those conditions was also interesting too. And also photographing polar bears in the middle of a national park in some blizzard conditions too, colder areas where you're working in the snow, and again, shooting individuals, shooting interaction between groups, small groups of animals. Sometimes you may be up there working with a researcher who is actually tracking the bears, well, that's good too. But just trying to get images that are, I guess, going to stand the test of time. Try to get some really good images in those areas that you can bring back and you can market. This is floating ice, and here we're working on floating ice, landing here on helicopters, and you start out in one position and you end up in another position as you're going around. So photographing some of the harp seals on the ice and going back into South America. And I told you my dad wasn't really that keen on me working with bugs. He wasn't sure about this, but I told him I was going to Brazil, and he said, I'd like to go to Brazil. I haven't been to Brazil. I said, well, you only have a passport. I said, you can't go to Brazil. You don't have a passport. He calls me up a month later. I've got a passport. So he wasn't really, I don't think he was quite as interested in collecting in Brazil as I was, because we were down in these river areas, and while I was trying to photograph some bugs, and he started becoming interested in other things. So he decided he was going to look at some other things to collect besides bugs. So this is my dad. We went to up into Michigan this last year, and we got some great pictures of them there too. But again, photographing insects in the field, it's kind of hard to do, and you just have to continue to practice. You have to work at it. You have to get the right angles. You have to do that. But really, if there's some quotes. I'm going to give you some take-home quotes. Whatever students are here, here's some take-home quotes. One is, you don't stumble through life living day to day. That doesn't work, Unless you plan it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Also, you don't really deserve anything by being there. Look, there were 300,000 penguins on this island. You really don't deserve anything by being there. You really get ahead by either working hard or working smart. And if you do both, then no one can stop you. Also, another thing that I always like to tell my kids, that there's seldom a day that can't be made a little better with ice cream. But just remember to always keep exploring. That's the main message. Thanks. They said I need to finish by about 4:45. That's pretty close. Pretty close. So I'll entertain questions now.